Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablan.
Hello and welcome to episode 69 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the QCMP is sponsored by Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection in boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. And Midwood Guitar Studio also has a luthier on staff for all your repair needs. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. This month on episode 69 of the QCMP, I'm speaking with luthier Kevin Marshall from Smiling Moon Guitars. Kevin is a one-man show at Smiling Moon, providing everything from setups to restoration and custom-built instruments. Although our conversation revolved around his luthier work, Kevin is also a singer-songwriter and has been active on the Charlotte music scene for over 2 decades. You can hear some of his music in the podcast from his group Kevin Marshall and the Jaywalkers. Kevin Marshall, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So, Kevin, fill me in. Are you originally from the Charlotte area?
I grew up in South Carolina, down in Lancaster, so yes and no. I've been coming to Charlotte my whole life, and started working here in the early 90s and finally moved here in 98, so I consider Charlotte my home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you, what's your music background?
Well, I started playing when I was a teenager, probably 14 years old, and I've been through a lot of different stuff. You know, when I first started learning, of course, you know, same stuff we all learned on the 70s singer-songwriter, James Taylor type stuff. And then from there, I started playing country music. And then from country music in the early 90s, we formed a band called the Wax Gurus, and we started doing alt rock when it was new.
Right.
Yeah, we were playing the stuff you were hearing on the radio at the time, and we were very successful with that. And I've always been a songwriter, so in the Gurus, we did a record called Burning Sky. We recorded it with Jamie Hoover, the Sponge Tones. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was quite an experience. It took us about a year, and it was a pleasure working with him. So we did alt rock and originals, and I stayed in that band from 93 till 2004. And then after that, started doing singer-songwriter type stuff. And then I recorded another record under Kevin Marshall and the Jaywalkers with Eric Lovell, Blue Bubble Studio. Mm-hmm. And then Eric and I put together a band to support that record when it was done. And we worked hard on that one record for 2 or 3 years. We got to do some really cool stuff, some festivals, big stage type stuff, and bar gigs too. Sure. A little bit of everything, yeah.
So did you stay pretty much regional, or, you know, with performing?
Mostly local? With the Wax Gurus, we did some like tri-state touring type stuff. But we were so popular in Charlotte, we couldn't get out of Charlotte. I mean, we didn't book gigs, they booked us. Right. But that was back when there was a lot of good bands in Charlotte, really drawing big crowds. Mm-hmm. With the Jaywalkers, we did a couple of tours down in the Low Country, down around Charleston, in 2 summers in a row, but mostly regional stuff. Yeah.
But currently you are the owner and luthier at Smiling Moon Guitars.
Yes.
So how did you transition from being a performer into repairs?
Well, my background is tool and die. Okay. So most people don't know what tool and die is. Machine shop type work, right. Metal stamping, injection molding, and machinery, that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. So every time I would take there weren't many shops around back then to repair guitars, and every time I would take a guitar somewhere to get it repaired, right, there was a little bit of disappointment at times. And and I'm looking at, a guitar is a precision, it's a machine basically. Yes. And I'm thinking, I can do tool and die work. I think I can figure out how to work on guitars. So that's when I started messing around. I bought a couple of cheap guitars and just something, if I messed it up, it was okay.
Sure.
And then I built my first guitar in the mid-90s, an electric, which I still have. It's a bit crude, but it's my first one, and I played it for years. In fact, I'll still play it if I need an electric. And that's how I kind of got started in the luthier work, just building my first guitar, and I used it in my band, the Wax Gurus. And then from there, I started doing setups for friends and bandmates and such. I had a little shop set up at home. And then it just kind of grew from there. I spent a lot of years building up all my tooling and everything. And when I finally got out of the tool and die world, I opened up my own shop.
So did you study with anybody, like formerly a luthier doing woodworking and that kind of thing? Or is it just all the experience from tool and die and playing and fiddling around, yourself?
Self-taught pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I've taken advice from other luthiers, but never took any classes or, anything like that, or school, whatever. Yep. Pretty much self-taught. A guitar setup is all geometry, and doing tool and die work is all geometry too. So familiar with the numbers, so to speak.
Right.
Where everything's supposed to be as far as a setup goes.
I mean, I've messed with stuff a little bit myself just because I was like, oh, I'm going to screw around with this. And I shielded a couple of my guitars and put some wiring in and things like that. Never anything major. Like I would still sometimes struggle like getting the setup the way that I want it. So I would always bring it to somebody because I do it. And I'm like, it's just always lacking,
Right.
And then somebody who does it like all the time and is really boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
And when you don't do it all the time, I think it's a little harder.
Oh yeah.
To kind of mess with it. So that's awesome. How long have you guys been in business at Smiling Moon?
Well, again, I was already doing work before I opened up officially, but I've been officially opened up for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you've been in the same location?
Same location, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Now, at Smiling Moon, you are the only person there in the shop. Somebody comes in, they're going to see you. They're not going to see
I'm a
anybody else
one-man
working with you.
operation, yeah.
How tough is that, just doing everything by yourself?
Well, I tell people I'm the president and the janitor and everything in between. It's a balance, yeah. It's not easy.
Have you ever thought of bringing on somebody, maybe an apprentice or anything like that, to kind of help you out and then teach them the trade?
Well, I have tried an apprentice, but the problem is my shop's not real big and I don't have room. Storage is an issue already because of the size of my shop. And if I was in a bigger location, I probably would try to hire someone. But there's not many people that know how, and you spend a lot of time teaching them and you're still not getting work done.
Right.
There's that dilemma. So it'd be nice if I could find somebody that already knows how to do the work.
Right.
But as far as apprenticeships go, when I was doing tool and die work, I taught a lot of young guys how to do the work. So I've done a lot of apprenticeships.
So what are the services that you offer over at Smiling Moon?
Anything from just basic string change, setups, major repairs, electronics, you name it, custom build, restoring vintage instruments, a little bit of everything.
Now, imagine we talked a little bit earlier. So, as a luthier, what's your bread and butter? It brings in the most your steady income.
Basic setups are where the money is. Yeah, but I do it all though.
But what's the thing that you love to do the most? If somebody brought in an instrument and you had your pick and choose of things to do with an instrument, what's the things that you really love to do with it?
Restoration. I don't do a lot of restoration because it's very time consuming.
Right.
But the thing you find with restoration, a lot of times it's a family heirloom, and the guitar's possibly been under a bed or in a closet for 30 years, when it belonged to their dad or their granddad, and they inherited it. So they want to get it restored, and once you get it done, I'm the guy that gets to strum it first after it's been sitting for 30 years. Sure. There's something about instruments. I'm a firm believer that they soak up a part of you. Whenever I restore a guitar, as soon as I strum it, I can tell if somebody loved that instrument. You can feel it. There's some magic there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then custom build. I love doing that because I've been building stuff all my life, and the creative process. Plus, being a musician, I'm a singer-songwriter, the same kind of thing, you know.
With restorations, has there been anybody who's coming into the shop with something and you just kind of look at them and you're like, yeah, this is too far gone. Like there's really not much I could do with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's happened many times. Yeah. If an instrument needs a neck reset, like an acoustic guitar, too many cracks in the body and braces loose, and you got to look at the book value of an instrument and determine, is it worth it?
Yeah.
You're spending more than it's worth. But now if it's sentimental and they don't care what it costs,
right?
You know, sometimes I'll take those on. But yeah, I've had several in that were too far gone.
Well, I met you a few months ago, and I hope you remember.
Yeah, oh yeah.
When it came in and I brought in that balalaika.
Yeah.
And I just, man, it was just great that you were real honest with me and you're just like, Matt, for me to do even repair on this, it's not that instrument that's even worth that kind of money. You know, just, you might as well just mess around with yourself and do it. It's going to be cheaper than me spending the time and money.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with those niche type instruments, a lot of times they're tourist instruments.
Right.
Like if you go to that country, it's a tourist thing, you know, like buying a ukulele in Hawaii.
It's more a wall hanger than it is an actual instrument.
Right, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll have to show it to you later because it actually came out not too bad. Like doing the repair and then put some new strings on and cleaned it up. I was like, okay, it plays.
Yeah.
You know, that's all I really needed to do because I'm not playing, you know, I'm not going to become a professional balalaika player in any stretch. So.
Yeah, well, if you did, you'd be the first one that I know personally.
So what's, when you're doing custom builds, are you more into electrics or acoustics? Which is your fave?
I wish I had room in my shop to build acoustics. That takes up a lot of space. There's a lot of tooling that goes along. The bending of the wood, the fixtures, and the clamping fixtures and all that. I don't have room for that. So I pretty much stick to electric. But a lot of my electric designs are, I will say, acoustic electric.
Right.
Like on the electric guitars, I'll use a piezo bridge to get the acoustic sounds, plus passive pickups to get the electric sounds. I'm working on one now that has both of those, an electric guitar. I'm also working on a new lap steel design.
Oh, okay.
That's something I'm really into is lap steels.
So do you build all kinds of instruments or do you specifically just kind of stay in the guitar?
Electric guitar and electric lap steels right now.
Okay. What's it so special about the lap steels that you really like?
Well, most lap steels are just a chunk of wood with pickups and, you know, hardware and strings, but mine are a little different. I play lap steel and I play Weisenborn. That's another thing. A lot of people don't know what that is. Weisenborns were built in the early 1900s.
Okay.
And they look like an acoustic guitar, but the whole body's a chamber all the way up to the headstock. It's hollow. And, so a guy in Chapel Hill, Rance White of Lazy River, built me a custom Weisenborn, and I just fell in love with that feel, the hollow body sound of a lap steel.
Right.
It's not a resonator. It's more like an acoustic guitar.
So it's thick like an acoustic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But you play it in your lap, you know, with a bar.
Yes.
So from that, my lap steel designs are hollow body, but they're electric and they're not as thick or as big as a Weisenborn.
Okay. So
it's electric Weisenborn's kind of what I'm shooting for. So you get more of an acoustic sound out of it than an electric sound.
Mm-hmm. So is some of this your own design specifically?
It's all my own designs.
Wow.
Yeah, all the electronics, pickups, everything. Yeah, and the bodies, the bracing.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Do you have any pictures of them on the website? That custom builds?
I've got one that I'm working on now. That's it's only on Facebook at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, just doing luthier work. What's the community like of luthiers in Charlotte? I know Charlotte's been growing so much over, the last 10 years. Is there a large network of luthiers that you know, or is it just a really tight-knit, several guys that you keep in touch with and talk about?
Well, fortunately and unfortunately, there's not enough of us to go around. There's only a few shops that are open to the public. like myself.
Right.
There's other luthiers in Charlotte that do custom build type stuff. But as far as open to the public for repairs, there's only a handful of us, and we're all really busy.
Yeah.
Thankfully. But it's a struggle because we're all really busy. Yeah.
So being busy, what's your turnaround? I mean, I think we were talking earlier, and depending on what the work is. So
it depends on the job, yes.
Like if you're coming into Smiling Moon to get a setup done, what's your turnaround generally?
Right now, setup, you're looking probably close to a month unless you've got an emergency.
Wow.
Yeah, I help working musicians and I help students. Because a lot of times students have lessons coming up, and if it's not real complicated, I'll knock it out so they have their instrument. Mm-hmm. Same with working musicians. If you got a gig this Friday and your guitar breaks down, I'll get it done so you can do your gig. But generally speaking, a minimum of a month, and I'm averaging 3 months out right now. So
is that a lot of things? I mean, I would imagine, one, you're good at what you do, so people are bringing you work.
Well,
two, I'd also imagine that part of that is the amount of people in Charlotte and then a lack of musicians. But we talked again earlier, but are you still backed up from COVID from some of the work that got brought in?
Oh, dude, I got really busy during COVID. The home entertainment business in general went through the roof. People were getting their guitars out of the closets and out from under the bed and deciding they're going to start buying guitars. There's a lot of that going on. The guitar market went crazy during COVID.
Yeah, that's for
sure. The vintage guitar market really went crazy during COVID. So people were bringing me instruments because they were stuck at home, bored,
right,
wanting to do something besides playing on the computer, and then it hasn't really slowed down since then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, being in business, it's a good problem to have, right?
Oh, yeah.
Time no see. In the course of time, I can see that you've been where you want to be. So what brings you around? It's not hard to see that there's not much left of this old town. To see your smile. If you got the time, I think we should go out for a while. Talk about old times. I remember when you told me on that Sunday afternoon you were gone. Still gone. You'll be gone. Well, it's good that you can still find.
But I'm just curious. I mean, why do you think that the market went so crazy? Because I know, a little secret to everybody, I used to buy a lot of stuff from like Guitar Center's used gear website, and for a while, for a good number of years, you could get a great deal on instruments. I mean, let's just say I have a Gibson Flying V I bought. It was $600.
Right.
And that's used. Man, now you look at that same guitar, it's $1,100 or $1,200.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's almost doubled for the used version of it. Why do you think the market went so crazy? Was it, you think it's just the shortage of materials coming from overseas, the wood? What do you attribute it to?
Yeah, the supply chain issues contributed to that a lot, but I think it was a lot of midnight hour purchases too. I mean, people that collect guitars, or again, people that wanted to start playing again. They were on the internet playing around because there's nothing else to do. And then, all of a sudden they hit the buy button.
Right.
And just supply and demand, I think, is basically what, drove the prices up on vintage guitars or used guitars. And it hasn't changed a whole lot. The prices are still up there. It's softened up a little bit, but not much.
Yeah. I've seen stuff that I've I sent my friend a picture when we were younger. He had a wonderful Aria Pro 2 bass.
Yep.
So he sold it to my old guitar teacher years and years ago. Whatever, $50, $75, something. I saw that same bass the other day on one of the used gear websites, and I sent it to him. It was $500.
Yeah.
It was like for an Aria Pro. You know?
Right, and those actually aren't bad instruments. Most of those were made in Japan. That's good stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, just that's how much it's increased,
Yes.
you know, over the years. Like, oh my gosh. And I guess, you know, people consider it vintage. You know, same thing with another type guitar, Ibanez Roadstars. I've seen how, like, those getting asked tons of money for them. I'm like, wow, just the prices are really kind of insane now.
They are, yeah. But if you've got a room full of guitars that you bought for cheap years ago, that's not a bad thing if you're selling them, you know.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, just seeing some of the new prices. I mean, I've seen some of the Les Pauls or even SGs. I mean, I'm like, this is just crazy.
Yeah. Well,
prices.
Gibson, I will say Gibson's doing a great job now. The new CEO, he's on it.
Have you seen some of them coming to the shop?
Oh yeah, the new Les Pauls. They're selling a lot of the J45 acoustics, and they're pristine and they sound fantastic. So they're doing a good job now. I'm glad to see that. Such an iconic brand,
right?
You know, you hate to see them go under, and that's almost happened.
Yes, a couple of times, right?
Right, but you know, with the Les Paul thing, I don't understand the mystique behind Les Pauls because they've made millions of them, but I put them in the same mystique as Corvettes. It's like you don't lose money on them. You buy one. It's an investment.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but it's an investment.
I think a lot of the mystique is in nostalgia. When you look at it, your favorite players played X guitar, and that's the guitar you want.
Yeah, Strats and Tellys and Les Pauls.
Yep, and those are the guitars. Now, curiosity will be in 20 years, if there isn't somebody playing those instruments, will those instruments still be as iconic? Because all top-notch players today, the young people, aren't really playing Les Pauls, and they're not playing Strats.
It's either some type of boutique instrument.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of young musicians taking like the old like Tyscos and things like that and having them restored with modern hardware and electronics, and because it's different and it sounds different. But, But yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's a lot of the older crowd musicians that are into the standard guitars, where the younger crowd's a little bit different as far as what they play.
And it makes me think, because there was a time when I kept thinking about buying a boutique guitar. But the only thing that holds me back from buying one, and I know they're going to be fabulous because somebody puts in tons of money, tons of time into it, and it's all quality materials and that kind of thing, is if you ever think about reselling it, I don't think, at least in my opinion, you can get your money back on a boutique instrument unless somebody's in the know and they know, about that particular style. You could tell them till the sun comes down, it's got all these electronics and it's got these kind of wood. It's got this guy builds guitars for, he's been building them for 45 years and and it sounds great. But, you hand somebody a guitar and go, this is a $4,000 guitar. And they go, it doesn't say Fender on the headstock. What does it mean?
Unfortunately, you're correct on that. Yeah. And there's a lot, because of the internet, there's a lot of boutique builders out there now. It's pretty saturated. And I'm a boutique builder, but I'm not trying to make a living building custom instruments. It's just one of the side things I do in my shop. But you're right. A lot of players, they want to see the brand name, the Martin, the Gibson, the Fender. The boutique guitars, I've had a lot of them in my shop where the woodwork was beautiful, but the mechanics of the instrument was off, and they paid a lot of money for the instrument, and it's hard to explain that to customers after they just spent $7,000 acoustic guitar and it's a mess, basically, and that happens. I've got an old saying, well, it's just an old saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of that in the guitar world, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, we jump in and we're just like, oh, I love it. It sounds great. And then we just buy it. But sometimes you don't think all the other things that are involved with it.
But now you have companies like Collings and Santa Cruz and,
right.
They're building premium instruments and they're bringing premium prices and the resale's still good on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some guitar.
According to who it is. Yeah.
There's some wonderful instruments out there, but man, all right. So I come from my background. I studied classical guitar for a long time, and I was extremely fortunate when I was living in Ohio, in Cleveland, that there was a guitar dealer there, and we as students were able to go over to his place, and he would take out a collection of like 10 guitars. So we would get to sit and you would hear handmade classical guitars and really good student players play on them. And you could, start to develop your ear and what sounds good and what you like to hear. And you're talking anywhere from guitars that were $3,500 to $15,000 instruments.
Yes, I've worked on some of those.
And being spoiled like that, sometimes I'll hear an instrument or play an instrument and I'm just like, I don't know if I would spend X amount of thousands of dollars for this particular boutique guitar, because I can hear it and I'm like, I don't know if it's worth that, and I know the time that goes into it. I know the electronics, I know the woods, I know the building, but in the end of the day, if I'm not hearing the sound that I want to hear, is it worth it?
Yeah. And then where are you going to play it?
Yeah.
Are you going to take a $15,000 guitar in a bar?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I've got a really nice acoustic that I adore, and it's worth a little bit of money, and I do gig with it. But I got a good deal on it when I bought it because they didn't know what it was when I purchased it.
Right.
And that guitar, I keep my eyes on it, because it means a lot to me. It's sentimental because of who I bought it from. But had I paid full price for it, I wouldn't take it in a bar. There's no way.
Yeah.
And that's what you run into. I call them bar guitars. There's a lot of musicians are taking like Epiphone Les Pauls.
Yeah.
They'll bring them to me and I'll replace hardware and electronics. And you got a great Les Paul for a whole lot less money than an actual Les Paul.
Yeah.
And you can take it in a bar. If it gets a ding in it or if somebody steals it or whatever, it's replaceable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big name musicians are doing that now. They're leaving their, 50-something Fender or Gibson. They're leaving them home and they're taking Epiphones. And
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of big names are playing like the Fender Squires. They just put better hardware on them. And if you do that, they're great guitars.
They are. There's more than it comes to mind. There's a guitar player from the prog rock band Marillion, and I remember reading an article in one of the guitar magazines. They're like, "Why do you play Squires?" He's like, "Good wood is good wood. If the instrument plays well, you can change out the electronics and you can make it sound good."
Exactly, especially with electric guitars. Acoustics are a little different because of the resonance,
right?
But the audience doesn't know the difference. If you're entertaining and there's noise going on, it's just a fleeting moment. They don't know if you're playing a $10,000 guitar or a $500 guitar.
Yeah, and some of those sounds that you loved as a kid, they might not necessarily have been recorded on, top-notch instruments.
Jimmy Page is a perfect example.
He is. I was going to mention him. I think the original Stairway to Heaven was done on like some kind of harmony acoustic.
They, I can't, what brand is it? It's like a Harmony Stratotone or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it's the 2 pickup model. He still has that guitar and he still does a lot of recording with it. Yeah.
And then plus I think he did a heck of a lot for the Dan Electro company.
It's a Dan Electro. That's what it is. Yeah.
He did Dan Electro, and then I think the acoustic stuff he recorded, he was like, we didn't have all these other instruments that came from the United States back in the day in England. So, I do acoustic work, and a lot of the early acoustic work was done on this acoustic harmony guitar.
Yeah. Well, I'm convinced it's not the brand, it's the build. Like you said, good wood is good wood. And I've had guitars that cost several $1,000s in my shop that I wasn't really that impressed with the tone, and then I pick up a $150 guitar, and I'm like, wow, this thing sounds great.
Yeah.
It's a shot in the dark is what it is.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you can change out with electric guitars, you can change the electronics and get a different sound.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, with an electric, it's basically a slab of wood. I mean, the wood does make a difference in the resonance and such.
Yeah.
But good pickups and good electronics and good hardware makes all the difference on an electric guitar.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I play Ovation guitars, and I love the sound of them. I'm not a traditionalist where I need this sound. Although I love the sound of like old Martins, and the sounds that would come off of recordings. But I tell you what, man, playing them, I'm not a huge fan. I don't love them the way I love my Ovations. I mean, somebody could be like, you're crazy. But
no, it's whatever suits you. I'm the same way. It's all
Yeah.
perception. And if the Ovations suit what you're doing, then that's what you should be playing.
yeah.
How long must this go on? Don't tell me nothing's wrong. I can see it in your eyes. Thought we were moving on, but after all that was said, I'm not at all surprised. How many times can sorry be said before the love we have can take over and clear our heads? But instead, this keeps on dragging on. Can't we just get past this? Or have we forgotten how? But there's been something wrong. And when love...
So do you have favorite instruments that you enjoyed playing when you were performing regularly, Kevin?
Yes, I have a K Yari, which is not an Alvarez Yari, built in the same factory, but it's one that he actually built.
Those were Japanese
Made, yeah. And Yari was a master luthier. Actually, his son still owns the business.
Really?
And I'm not sure about the Alvarez thing, but they still build the K Yaris, and they're extremely nice and extremely expensive. But that guitar, I got lucky on it. I bought it from a friend, Steve Shearer, who has since passed. So it's one of those that I could never get rid of. It's very sentimental, but I got a really good deal on it, but it's built like a $4,000 guitar. So it's my favorite acoustic. Then I play lap steel also. So I have a Weisenborn style lap steel that I play.
Okay.
So those are, I've got other guitars, but those are my go-tos.
Just thinking about the Alvarez's, you said they're still making them?
The K Yaris, yes, they're still in business.
Because you don't see them much anymore, and they're good guitars.
They mostly Asian and European countries. You don't see them in the United States. You can order them. Even the K Yari, it was bought new. The one that I have, it was bought new in Japan in the early 80s, and I still have the hang tags and the owner's manual that came with it. And they're all written in Japanese, so you couldn't buy those in the United States because of the Alvarez deal that Yari had. You could only get them in European and Asian countries then.
I think that's one of the downfalls of some of the big box stores like a Guitar Center or a Sam Ash is I don't see everything that's out there anymore. Just like you can go in and you'll see certain models of guitars and that's it. And there used to be, I don't know if you ever saw it, but down in Gaffney, it's been closed for a good number of years. There was a music store. It's now a sports hunting sex type center. And I went in there one time on the way home, when I was visiting Atlanta, and I stopped and I was like, man, they have a whole bunch of guitars and amps that I can't find because they were an independent store.
Yeah, the mom and pop thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, but it was mom and pop, but it was huge. It was a huge facility. And, I was like, oh my gosh, they've got all this stuff. And I don't see this in a Guitar Center or a Sam Ash.
Well, they're bound by contract with all the major manufacturers, so it's harder for them to carry like boutique instruments and the different brands. That's the reason behind that. But the mom and pop stores weren't bound to the manufacturers.
Right.
So you'd see more of that type of stuff.
It's amazing, the business aspect of that, how that works, where you can't see what other stuff that you would want to buy.
Right, yeah. Thanks to the internet, we can.
But it's a beautiful thing, the internet, but it's trying it out. It's like most of the time, it's like, are you going to be able to try it out for 30 days, and check it out to see if you like it? Sometimes it's like, if you buy it, you buy it.
Well, that's the problem with ordering instruments on the internet. You don't know what it's like until you get it home and unbox it.
Yep.
Instead of sitting down in a music store and actually strumming the instrument. And I have to make a connection with a guitar. And so I've ordered stuff off the internet, but most of it was vintage type stuff for restoration.
Okay.
But as far as a player guitar, I have to sit down and play it. I can't order something.
Yeah.
And then you got to send it. If you don't like it, box it up, send it back. I would rather sit down in a music store and pick out different guitars until something suits me.
So are you like me, where as soon as you start to play something, if you like it or not?
Oh yeah, you can feel it. Yeah, there's something there. Yeah.
It's amazing playing an instrument where you just like, pick something up and you're like, oh my gosh, what?
There's magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I restore an instrument in my shop, it's kind of the same thing. I'll know it. If it's been sitting for 30 years, as soon as I strum it, I can tell that somebody's in that instrument.
So are you spoiled in the sense where, when guitars come into your shop and you've seen just so many different things over the years, you're just like, wow, I've seen some fantastic instruments.
Oh yeah. I get to see some cool stuff. Yeah.
What's one of the standouts? Can you think of anything offhand? Something you just like, wow, I can't even believe this came into my shop.
I don't know. There's been so many. I've had a few vintage Gibsons in the shop the past couple of years that I've restored that were handed down, inherited from a granddad or whatever, that once I got them done, they just absolutely blew me away.
Right.
That's mostly the ones. And I've had a lot of really nice boutique instruments in the shop. Same kind of thing. I've had so many guitars in the shop, it's hard to say. And I've worked on some crazy stuff too. I've worked on a couple of Venas, which is similar to a sitar. It's an Indian instrument, but you play it in your lap, kind of like a lap steel, but it's a fretted instrument.
Okay.
Instead of standing up like a sitar. And those were very interesting.
Was that something you had to do some research on how they worked?
Yeah, thanks to YouTube and Google. We're all a Google search away from genius. So thanks to the internet, the best encyclopedia in the world, I can look up, and I did have to, yes, because I'd never worked on one before.
Well, I imagine some of it is the talent in you, that you know what you're doing and the skills. So
you figure it out.
It's not just YouTube,
Yeah, and the Vena is the oldest string instrument in the world. If you look at Indian history, if you see a picture of the goddess of education, she's holding a Vena in every picture. So that instrument's thousands of years old.
I'm curious about restoration. So when an old instrument comes in and people are asking you to restore it, is it restoration for the sake of bringing back the instrument, or is there some value in it? So will the value of the instrument decrease if you do a restoration on it, or will it increase, or does it not even matter at that point? Like, the instrument needs to get saved, we're going to bring it back, and is it still going to be worth something?
It's according to what you do. If it's a major restoration, it can decrease the value because, if you hope to find, if you're into vintage instruments, you hope to find that 1940, 50 something Martin that doesn't need anything but new strings.
Right.
Those are the valuable ones. But, as soon as you start modifying any instrument, finish work and cracks and bracing and all that, it does decrease the value some. But a lot of what I see are family heirlooms.
Okay.
So they really don't care. They want them functional again. And
pass it down to the next generation.
So they can keep passing it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I remember I brought in a guitar. I don't know. I forget who I brought it to. It was either Nick or Craig years ago, and I was talking about refinishing. Like I have a 74 SG, and they were just like, no.
No, that's the worst thing
like,
you
don't
can do.
do that. And I was like, what? They're like, I won't even do it for you. Even if you wanted me to do it, I won't do it.
No, you don't want to do that even if it's really beat up. That's what's cool about it. That's real relic.
Yeah.
I'm not big into relic instruments. I will do it if I have to, especially on a vintage instrument. If it's missing a part, I'll age metal parts or whatever to make them match, or, do whatever I need to do to make it match. But as far as like taking a new instrument and doing all the relic work to it, I don't really agree with that. That's called playing. If you play it long enough, it's going to get beat up. So that's the worst thing you can do is refinish a vintage instrument that needs, you think it needs it, but as far as the market goes, those are actually the ones that sell the most.
Right. Because
people love that. It's been played.
Do you think it impacts the sound?
Well, we talked about this earlier. There's something about instruments. I am a believer that it soaks up a part of your soul. And
right.
You see an instrument that's well played and well worn. Somebody loved that instrument, and you can feel it when you play it. There's something there.
Because I've heard different for players, basically, not luthiers or anything, but like they'll do a different finish on it or something like that, or a different paint, and all of a sudden they said the character of the instrument has changed. It's not the same that it was.
Yeah, finish does affect the tone of an instrument because of the wood. It vibrates, and especially like acoustic guitars, because an acoustic guitar is an air pump.
Right.
So if you put too much finish on an acoustic guitar, it does hold it back a little bit.
So I did have a refinish done on my classical, but that has oh my goodness, now I'm going to forget off the top of my head. It's a certain type of polish. It's really thin.
You got French polish.
Yes, the French polish on it. And after 20 years, the wood was just coming through, and it needed to get refinished. And I actually had to send that out to California to a guy that I know out there to get that done. Man, but it came back, and I was like, it was fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's according to the value of the instrument, and is it for sale?
Right.
If it's something that you're going to keep the rest of your life and it needs it, for the maintenance side of it, I don't have a problem with that. But like, like you're talking about a 74 SG, no, don't refinish that guitar, no matter how bad it looks. I've got a 59 Melody Maker, and somebody drilled a hole in the headstock, and you could tell they hung it on the wall like on a nail. Yeah. Somebody asked me, are you going to fill that hole in? I'm like, absolutely not. That's the story there's a story there. Yeah. Some old guy loved this instrument, but he was too cheap to go buy a stand. So he drills a hole in the headstock, hangs it on the wall. I think that's cool. Oh my gosh. I think I would, depending on the instrument, I don't even know if I would buy an instrument like that if I saw it, but if it had that kind of character in it. Yeah. Leave it alone. That's the story. Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about relicking stuff earlier. What do you think about that whole market of people taking brand new guitars or the companies selling relic instruments? Like, hey, here's a brand new Strat, but it's relicked. It looks old, that you've put time into it. I don't agree with it personally. It's according to what the customer wants. Yeah. My thing is play the guitar, and if you play it long enough, it's gonna get relic naturally. Right. It is a big market, and I've seen some that are really, really, really good, and I've seen some relic jobs that were really, really bad. It just looked like somebody tied them behind a car and drug them up and down the street for a little while, but it didn't look relic. It just looked like somebody ruined a good guitar. Yeah. I had a friend of mine, I bought this knockaround bass, and he messes with basses a little bit. So I was like, dude, he's like, I'll mess with it. And I was like, okay. So he put this other neck on for me, but the body I don't know why this person did it, but some players just do weird stuff, and they had like permanent marker all over it. Right. And couldn't get it off. I tried
wiping it, cleaning it, scraping. I was like, hey man, do you want to just mess with this and, relic it, to get rid of this, wherever that marker is. And he came back. I personally, I'm like you, I would rather have put the time into it, but I mean, just to get rid of that.
Right. Yeah. I had a customer bring in a fender, same thing. Somebody attempted to relic it. And again, it just looked like they tied it behind their car and, took it around the neighborhood. And the customer was like, is there anything you can do with this to finish the job, to make it look right? So I have a friend down in New Orleans, Bayou Guitars, and she by far is the best at doing relic work in the world, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So I contacted her and I sent her some pictures. And so I did some of the parts in the shop, but I basically took the whole guitar apart and shipped it to her and told her what we were looking for, and to salvage what's the mess that somebody had made on it. And when it came back and I put it back together, it's a black guitar. It looks demonic almost. It's got an evil look to it, which is really cool. Yeah. So it turned out really good. And I would have, if I had an opportunity, I would buy that guitar and I would play it, because it's one of the better relic jobs I've seen. It's just something about the way it turned out. And I had an early 70s Fender bass, same kind of thing. It had survived a house fire, so the top was a mess from the heat. Yeah. I think it was the only thing he saved was that guitar.
Wow.
But it had been changed around over the years. So again, I relic some of the parts in the shop, and then I farmed the rest out to my friend in New Orleans, and it turned out really good. And I sold it to my bass player, Tim McDonald, in the Jaywalkers, and he adores that guitar. And it's so ugly, it's beautiful.
Speaking of all this relicking, I'm just curious, when doing repair work, how often does it happen that somebody comes in and tried to repair their own instrument and kind of messed it up, and they're just like, hey, I messed this up. This is what I was trying to do. Can you fix what I did?
Sometimes once a week. I see a lot of that. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. Because I mean, guitar repair work's not cheap.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see that a lot. Somebody try to do it themselves and then bring it to me to correct the mistakes that they made.
Right.
And we all want to know how to work on stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do it with a cheap guitar.
Right. If you want to learn how to work on guitars, that's my advice. Go buy a couple of $200 guitars and start learning on those. But I do see that quite often. And it's, most of the time it's a mess. That's all I'll say.
I'm sure it happens. I mean, I've been there, and my thought is like, well, I mean, how bad can I screw it up? I just bring it to somebody who kind of can fix it. And I guess I'm paying for it either way, right?
Yeah. Just be careful with super glue. That's the worst mistake you can make.
Well, honestly, one of the worst things I have probably been victim of is using the wrong nut driver to fix the
truss rod.
Yeah, because sometimes I feel like that is a specific size, and you can't just use like an Allen key to do it.
No, they're all different. All manufacturers use different stuff, and they put the truss rods in different locations. And truss rods sets, doing that on a guitar, it's relative to the instrument, because instruments are made out of wood and there's a lot of variables there, fret heights. And, sometimes if you adjust a truss rod and it's still not playing right, you've got fret problems,
right,
which need to be addressed. But I use a straight edge and a gauge, and I set the truss rod initially to a number that I use, and then I'll play it. You can play a guitar in the first 5 or 7 positions on every string. Mm-hmm. And if you hear that zzz, that sitar-ish kind of sound,
right,
you need more relief in the truss rod. It's not an exact science. You can't run a guitar neck flat. It won't work. You have to have relief in the neck to make it play properly. But there's a fine line as to how much, because you can't have too much relief.
Right.
And if you take a truss rod cover off on a guitar and it needs to be adjusted and the truss rod's locked down, stop. Don't go any further.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about that. It's like sometimes the size of it, like just when I think I've got the perfect size to adjust it, it doesn't seem to work right.
Oh, dude, if you saw how many truss rod wrenches I have in my shop.
Oh, my gosh.
That's a little bit of everything. Yeah, you never quit buying tools in this type of work.
It's very interesting. Like you can purchase a guitar and it comes with its own set of tools, you know, and you're like, you can have 75 sets of freaking Allen keys.
You know, the Asian made instruments are all metric, and Americans, you know, they use the English system, and there's I've got a lot of truss rod wrenches in the shop, believe me.
Hey, speaking of truss rods, I'm just curious, is it an aesthetic thing or is it a practical working thing that truss rods, the top is either on a truss rod cover, is on the headstock, or sometimes you see guitars where the truss rod is down by the bottom of the neck. Is there a reason for that?
That's per manufacturer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or up inside the guitar like a Martin.
Yeah.
Acoustic. Yeah. It's per manufacturer. The fenders where you have to take the neck off to adjust a truss rod, those things drive me crazy, because if you've got a vintage fender and you have to take the neck off, I've had them off a half a dozen times tweaking the truss rod.
Yeah.
So you have to loosen the strings, take the neck off, adjust the truss rod, put the neck back on. And the problem with that is the wood screw holes will get stripped out over time.
Yeah.
So I curse those a lot.
That's, I have a Charvel, and I know it is a pain in the butt to adjust that truss rod because it's down at the bottom of the neck, and then you almost have to take off the pick cover to get at it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why would you do this? It's crazy to have to even just repair it.
Yes. You know? I curse those a lot.
The worst guitars I love them, but I hate them. Floyd Roses. Like, as a player, they're fun, but when I would bust a string, I literally had to bring it to somebody to put a string on because, like, there's just to balance it.
I call those the British sports cars of guitars. If you don't know how to use a screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver on the tremolo springs, then you don't need to have a Floyd Rose type guitar.
Oh my
gosh. It's the same. It's the same thing as a thermometer.
Right.
Temperature changes the setup. So you've got it at home, you know, in your environment, and you go out to a bar or to another environment and something moves on it. They're very finicky.
Right.
But if you know how to adjust them, that's not a big deal, and it doesn't take much to adjust them. Less is more. When you turn in a screwdriver, you know, adjusting the springs or whatever, you just barely tweak it, and that usually does the job.
Right.
But yeah, those are very, very finicky instruments. Especially like the Jacksons and the Charvels, those types, because they have really thin necks on them also.
Right.
Yeah.
Fun necks.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's a purpose there.
Yeah.
But you have to be somewhat of a technician to own one of those instruments. You got to know how to adjust it.
Yeah. Or you're like me and it sits around for a long time because you're playing stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
you have to take it to somebody. But the thing is, you bring it to my shop and I set it up. I'm going to tell you, as soon as you get it home, it's probably going to change because it's in a different environment. But this is what you need to do to correct that as far as adjustment. Yeah.
So out of curiosity, do you do any classes or anything to the general public, like every couple times a year or something like that? Do like a setup class or care class or something like that for a general folks?
I haven't really got into that. I've had some of the music schools inquire about doing that, and I would be glad to do that, especially with younger students. Teach them how to change strings and clean, you know, maintain an instrument. Right. And they need to know how to do that because I get a lot of instruments in my shop where somebody doesn't know how to change the strings, you know, and it's a mess. So I'll show them, you know, this is what I do. And this is, you know, just keep it simple. And once I show them, then they've got it. Right. So, yeah, I'd be glad to do something like that. But I don't have a whole lot of room in my shop for that type of stuff.
Right. We could do an online web.
I've actually
web
thought
class.
about putting camera equipment in my shop and starting a YouTube channel just around that because people love geeking out on.
Oh my gosh, yes.
On guitars and such, yeah.
I mean, it would be great if you did like when you had time to do a restoration thing, if you did something like that and just be like, hey, I mean, even if it wasn't for a learning process for people, be like, okay, so here's how we're doing this and we're applying, whatever this finish is and sanding it down. And you have like whatever, 15 or 20 videos devoted to like, this restoration, this instrument.
And there's a lot of that stuff out there on YouTube. It's really cool. Again, it's time. Investing the money in the equipment and the time to do it, and then the editing afterwards. And but yeah, I geek out on luthier videos on YouTube or anything. It's an encyclopedia.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's wonderful how much knowledge is out there now. I mean, even outside of guitar stuff, like
everything. Yeah.
I had to change the air filter in my car. Not even in the engine. Yeah. They're like, there's a compartment in the dashboard and you got to unplug your, this and take this out and pop this. I'm like, seriously? I wouldn't even know this thing was here.
Once you watch the video, it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then if you go to the repair shop, it's like,
right.
We're going to charge you $26 for the air filter and, we're going to charge another $20 to, take the air filter out.
Yeah. But there's a downside to that too, because people lose work. You get on YouTube and figure out how to change the filter in your car. The mechanic loses that job.
That is true. But I mean, I usually bring my shop to the stuff for all the big things, not even just the minor things.
I used to work on cars. I was a motorhead for years, and I worked for a race team before I opened my guitar shop at the engine shop for Evernham Motorsports. And now I don't even want to get my hands dirty anymore. That way, grease and grime, yeah.
Oh, whatever it is, it's a labor of love. I mean,
it definitely is.
You can't work on cars or guitars or anything else without getting a little messy, I would imagine.
Oh, guitar work's extremely messy, but it's more dusty.
Yeah.
Than it is. It's well, of course we don't want grease on guitars,
right?
But it's a very dusty environment.
What's just out of curiosity? One thing I've never really understood much, tuners. So let's say we're looking at guitar tuners. What is the difference between some of the high-end tuners and then like, I feel like sometimes you get even a Gibson or something like that, and the tuners are not as quality as some of the other tuners are. What's the deal with that? Do you know?
Well, it's like anything. It's according to how much you pay for it, but there's different brands out there that are really good. Cheap tuners are the reason that there's so many of the, like the K's and the Harmonies and the Silver Tones, those types of Regals.
Right.
There's a lot of those instruments still around because the tuners were garbage when they were new.
Right.
They didn't have the technology that we have now. And so you get frustrated trying to tune a guitar and you end up just giving up on it and throwing it in the closet or under the bed,
Right.
And so a lot of those have, come out from under the bed, and fortunately, you can get better tuners, hardware for stuff now that looks vintage.
Yeah.
Kluson makes a lot of stuff that looks vintage. But yeah, it's just the quality of workmanship, what you pay for it, the gear ratio. A lot of the old tuners were 12 and 14 to 1, and a lot of the new ones are 18 and 19 to 1.
All right, so
they're a lot smoother.
You say that. Explain that to me. I have no idea what that means. That is complete Greek.
Well, you have on the tuner itself, the knob, there's a worm gear, and then you have a regular round gear inside that's connected to the post. It's the number of teeth, basically, and it's how many turns, 19 to 1, so you turn it 19 times and it rotates once and it's just smoother.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a more accurate tuning the higher the number, like 19 to 1 as opposed to 6 to 1.
Yeah, more accurate when you're just tweaking it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is it well, I guess it depends on the person. Is it worth changing out that kind of thing sometimes?
Absolutely. Unless it's a vintage instrument and you don't want to change the hardware for the value.
Right.
But even on vintage instruments, like I said, Kluson has a lot of reproductions now. And you can just throw a set of those on an old Gibson or old Martin or whatever, but keep the originals. If you ever want to sell the instrument, you've got the original parts. And if the new owner, they can put them back on there if they want to.
Right.
But to make it a player, you're better off putting better hardware, better tuners on it.
Yeah, I found sometimes with custom instruments, you almost have to use the original kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, a number of years ago, I had a different bridge put on my SG, and I thought it was going to be better, and it was never the same.
Really?
I actually had to have them go back in and put the original bridge. I was like, I don't like this at all.
Yeah, it's whatever works for you. Yeah. Well, there's some good stuff out there now. Tone Pros is a brand. They make extremely good bridges for electric guitars, so you can upgrade to one of those. And again, if you have the original, keep it.
Right.
Keep it with the guitar.
Because I mean, some of my vintage instruments, I'm not looking, it's not resale or I'm not worried about like
players,
price.
great
Yeah,
guitars.
I don't care, man.
Yeah. You want the mechanics right.
Yeah, I just want to be able to play it. I mean, I've had the guitar since I'm a kid, so I'm like, I'm never getting rid of this thing.
Yeah,
it's
sentimental.
not getting sold. That's the way it is. So, what other kind of things are you involved with, Kev? You do all the luthier work. Are you still playing at all? What is your situation?
Well, I kept a full calendar playing. I've been playing in Charlotte since the early '90s, and I kept a full schedule for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Doing either full band gigs or acoustic gigs, and then COVID kind of put a stop to a lot of us, and I took a break. I didn't even bother to book any gigs during COVID. Or even try to, because the few gigs that were out there were people that needed them more than me.
Right.
And since then, I just haven't really got back in the groove of playing full time. I mean, I had to get over the gig addiction, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I would look at the calendar, and if there was an empty spot, I felt like a failure. It's like,
yeah, you do.
yeah. And then I would get the calendar full, and then I would look at this one gig. I'm like, why am I even playing there? I don't like that place. There's a lot of that, but it was the addiction of, and it's a huge part of my income for many, many years. But, I'm a singer-songwriter, and right now I'm doing more of that. Me and a guy named Joe Middleton and, Mike Bader that played with me in the Jaywalkers, my last full band, we did a thing this past year called the Southern Gothic Music Club.
Okay. I think I saw that.
Yeah, it's singer-songwriter in the round, and we'll do a show, and we'll bring in another writer and just swap songs. But through that, me and Joe have learned a lot of each other's songs, so we accompany each other.
In those singer-songwriter circles, how many songs do you generally do for each person does?
It's according to the length of the show, obviously, but usually 2-hour shows, you'll end up doing 6 or 7 songs each. So that, I don't think we have a whole lot on the books right now, but we've played some really cool shows with that act. And then I released a record in 2015 under Kevin Marshall and the Jaywalkers, recorded with Eric Lovell at the Blue Bubble Studio in Charlotte. Mm-hmm. And we put together a band, and we worked that record for a few years. Now those guys, we had songs that we didn't record, and now those guys are coming to me and saying, we're ready to do another record.
There you go.
And it's, it's all my material. And I'm like, well, these guys are asking me, I'm not asking them. So I'm going to have to do that one, So kind of hard to say no on that when they're all ready to do it.
So are you up on all the technology thing, recording at home, or would you just go to a studio and record it?
I am not a button pusher. I work with Eric Lovell. Yeah.
Okay.
I've been working with him for a long time. And he's a great producer, and he and we can argue and get along at the same time over an idea,
right?
Which is what it should be in the studio. We co-produce, because when I write a song, I hear all the parts.
Yeah.
I just can't play all the parts, so I can explain to him and show him what I can do on a guitar, as far as leads and things like that. I'm more of a rhythm player, so I can explain to him what I want as far as a lead part. And it usually comes out exactly, like what I'm looking for.
Wow.
And same with Mike Bader that played in the Jaywalkers. He's one of those, yeah. And Tim McDonald played bass with us, and Matthew Carter played drums. That was a tight band, really tight band, and we all got along. There was no drama or anything. So, again, it's kind of hard to say no when they're coming to me wanting to do a new record. So we're going to get started on that here soon.
Very cool.
Get back in the studio.
So, Kevin, as we start wrapping things up, If we want to get in touch with you at Smiling Moon Guitars, how do we do that?
SmilingMoonGuitars.com. It's my website, which I'm about to revamp. I'm going to start a new website where I have my shop and my original music and all my merchandise on the same website. But right now, just SmilingMoonGuitars.com or Facebook under my name, Kevin Marshall, or under Smiling Moon Guitars on Facebook.
Fantastic. Yep. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming in today, Kevin. It's been a pleasure talking to you, dude.
Same here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Thanks for listening to episode 69 of the Queen City Music Podcast, and I hope you'll go back and check out past episodes. And if you'd be so kind as to leave a review, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can find the QCMP on all your favorite streaming platforms. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners, Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com, Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com, Queen City Live at instagram.com/Queen City Live Music, and Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org. Until next month, get out there and support your local live music scene by going to see some of these talented artists and support some of these local businesses. Take care.